Hello, you're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet.
There's a process inherent in becoming a mother that pushes us past our edge, that makes us grow from being a woman to becoming a mother.
Look at that, a little girl.
Oh, I can't believe it.
Wow, that was intense. I thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it, and then I did.
Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. It's about family, connected parenting, celebrating your amazing body, connection with your community, and finding your truth. Our show is coming to you from the studios of Bay FM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network and globally via our podcast at pbbmedia.org.
We are living on this planet as if we had another one to go to, and that's a quote by Terri Swearingen. If we all make small changes, big changes can happen. This episode, our guest Jannine Barron shares with us ways families can make small yet meaningful changes for both greater quality of their own life, of your own life, and for the betterment of our planet. Raising kids is, let's face it, a huge ecological footprint on the planet, but it doesn't have to all be bad. We are going to explore ways you can decrease that footprint and still have that great quality of life. We have essential keys for change you can start making even today. My guest Jannine Barron is founder of Nature's Child. It's a progressive earth-based business for the past 18 years. Jannine is a self-described entrepreneurial activist, and she says change the world every time you shop. And she's also a mother of two. Welcome you to the studios, Jannine.
Thank you, Lara. Thanks for having me. And anyone who might be about to switch off thinking, oh no, I don't want to talk about pollution, I promise to make this really fun and exciting.
Jannine, can you tell us firstly why are you so passionate about the environment and combining that with raising children?
Wow, okay. Didn't expect that question. You know, I don't even know if I can answer that. It's such an intuitive, innate thing in me. It's like I've always known it. I always remember back to 23 years ago when people say, why did you have a home birth? And even then I say, I don't know. Not that I'd heard of it. There was just a calling inside me. So, you know, I always say that I listen to the Indigenous peoples of the world and they tell us that Mother Earth can live without us, but we can't live without her.
Did that sort of passion for you come about having been pregnant and then having had your kids going, like, you know, wow, I better start, you know, it's not just, life isn't all about me, which, you know, can be in that earlier phase of one's life. And then you have kids, there's greater responsibility, what kind of planet we're going to leave them and so forth.
Look, life pre-children is usually focused around travelling, partying, working hard. Your focus is on the takeaway coffee. It's on anything but, you know, really looking at your life is what being pregnant does. It's like this amazing personal development course where you suddenly go, oh, how do I live? Where do I live? What do I buy? What kind of lifestyle do I want to bring up? So it's absolutely, you're spot on. It's a massive turning point. For me, it was more of a gradual, I lived like that anyway. So it was just bringing that into my new world.
You have a few blogs that you write around pollution-free parenting, sustainable living, and how to do that, particularly in those early years of having a baby. What's some of the main blogs you've been writing recently?
Recently, I'm really passionate about this idea of consent, actually. We talk about consent in all sorts of ways in our lives, but we don't often talk about it around products. And I love to say to people, every time you buy something, you're actually giving consent to a company to exist. Now, a lot of your listeners may have heard that, you know, there's basically 10 major corporations that essentially own everything in the world. So they only exist because we buy their products. This is what I say to people. So I love to talk about how we're actually all potentially revolutionaries. You never have to go hold a placard, go on a protest. You never have to write a letter, although I encourage you to do all those things. But let's say you didn't want to do any of those. Every single person every day is going to the shop and buying something, whether it's food, water, drinks, school items. We all shop. So I love this idea that that's the place where we talk about consent and have the conversation around pollution, because we're all doing it anyway. So you can be a revolutionary or not.
Do you think there's perhaps, just like you said, for you, there was just this calling inside of you, and it was sort of a way you sort of lived your life already? When we look at the diversity across Australia and across globally as well, and people's various interests, is there perhaps, not that there is technically a gene for this, but is there a gene, kind of, so to speak, where some people are just interested in preserving our environment?
I think there's only one way for that to happen, and that is to actually have an experience in an environment yourself. And I think most people, not everyone, if you're living up here, you certainly have. You have an experience where you feel the sand beneath your toes, you see that beautiful sunset, you see a forest there or not. So I think everyone in their lives has had some experience where they go, wow, because there's something about the environment that will make everyone feel awestruck at some point. And if we have a gene, I love this idea of a gene, I think that gene is actually waiting for an awakening. In the same way that the earth is this incredibly patient, living, breathing entity that's waiting for us to realise this as well.
Potentially part of the dilemma here is that that connection and understanding the value of the environment and our choices in choosing products that support a sustainable environment is actually also for us, for people, to actually be in an environment that we feel that connection to the natural world, so bushwalks, rainforests. And so for those who live in suburbia and city dwellings that are concrete lives, what's something they can do to connect with nature?
That's why I'm so interested in commercialism and activism, because I think commercialism is the main way people in the city deal with things. There's a lot more consumerism when you live in the city. It's just the nature of it. When you live somewhere like this, your first thought of the day might be, let's go to the beach, or let's go for a bushwalk, whereas in the city, if you're in suburbia and you don't have that access to even a park nearby, it's going to be, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to go to work, or I'm going to go to a cafe to meet people, or I'm going to go to a gig to see a band. It's much more of a consumer base. So that's the place where we need to have the conversation about saying, live the life you want to live, but there's a way you can actually stay connected to the earth. So that's our role, I think, as companies, is that and that's around packaging, it's around ingredients. And we love hearing news like countries like France who have just already made that decision by 2020, there's no more petrol cars. So change can happen at that government level, but change can happen in a personal level. It's as simple as that. If we just don't want things that we think are normal right now, the shelves will change. It's just really normal now to have a turmeric latte and a raw treat dessert, isn't it? But what that actually does, and Pete Evans is wonderful at this, I think he's terrific, and he talks about how literally every time you eat anything, it literally changes the water, soil and the earth. Literally.
Right. And Pete Evans, he's author.
Pete Evans is he's probably known in the mainstream as a celebrity chef, but he's actually an activist and a health food fanatic. Yeah.
Janine has on her website, she has the stuff tests. Can you go into a bit of that, Janine? Yeah,
absolutely. There's I like to call it stuff, because I think stuff is the things we don't need, and then there's essentials. So here's the stuff test that you can apply to everything you buy, everything from the toilet paper in the morning to the shampoo you wash your hair with, then to the food you go to at your breakfast table, to the car you drive, to the fuel you use, etc. So here we go. So the first question is, where was it made? Super simple. Was someone paid a fair wage? How many air miles did it take to get to you? So just where was it made? Who are you supporting in that process? The second question is, what's it made of? So is it a substance that's biodegradable? What is the production process, and what are the toxins that are created from a production process? Is the product ultimately toxin-free by the time it reaches you? The third is, can it be resold or repurposed when you're finished with it? And the fourth question is, how will you dispose of it? So I had this great experience the other day where I had a few minutes to spare in Byron. I found myself wandering down the street and I walked into a chain store that I haven't been into since I was about 13. And I went through the whole process, and there was a lovely shop assistant, and then I found myself trying on clothes. I got to the change room and I'm standing there looking pretty okay in this outfit. And I thought to myself, hang on a second, the stuff test, where was this made? What's going to happen to it? Went and put it back on the rack and walked out. And it was really great for me to have that experience, because despite all my passion, I can still get caught up in this wave of wandering and consumerism. And so that brings me to point number 5, which is, do you really need it? And sometimes the joy can happen just by trying it on in the change room, or it can be holding it in your hand or staring at it on the internet page, but not actually pressing buy. So I do appreciate that some items are there for our pure joy, but for me, they still have to apply to meet the stuff test. So I've got a gorgeous ornament at home that someone recently gave me, but it was made by this gorgeous group of Aboriginal women in the Territory out of biodegradable reeds, and it's this divine sculpture. But hey, it meets the stuff test, and I was really grateful that a friend did that. So yeah, the stuff test, people. Yeah.
And we'll give you a link later on where you can take a look a bit more at that.
Yeah, there's more detail on that, but that gets us going.
And you mentioned things about our planet previously, and just why should people care?
Yeah, okay, great. So look, this is why you should care. This is the doom and gloom bit, and we promise to get onto the fun stuff again. Just have a think about some statistics, okay? So I'm ultimately, part of my background is academic and historian, so I have to bring this kind of stuff into it. So between 1917 and 2017, right, the last 100 years, we had a population boom that went from 1.5 billion to 7.5 billion, okay? Before that, it had only been rising at 500 million the 100 years before that, and even less before that. So we had the biggest population growth possible. At the same time, we had some really other significant things happen. We had pesticides introduced for the first time. We had major world wars. We had industrialisation and computerisation. So there's been a combination of a massive population boom with an incredibly growth in toxicity and chemical use. Okay, so we have just, what we've done in the last 100 years is mind-blowing in terms of planet damage. So that's just a fact and a reality. You can have a different take on that, but you can't beat statistics. So that's where we're at. Knowing that, the scary and exciting opportunity for us is how we're going to spend the next 100 years. And so that's why I think things like having conversations like this, particularly for parents and women are huge polluters. I mean, we all are, but I love to talk to women about the fact that we menstruate every month. What product do you use? Because that's creating waste if you're not at least trying some of the reusable products. With parents, it is cheaper to reuse. You know, one of the biggest complaints about parenting is how expensive it is. And I get really excited and say to people, well, it's cheaper to live pollution-free when you parent. And
that's a simple, or maybe not so simple for some, switch between disposable to cloth, or, you know, having at least some cloth and maybe disposable, eco-disposables when you know, essentially need them out and about if you must, I guess.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a changing of mindset. There's a huge amount of support in this community for failing around reusable products with parenting. It's really interesting for me the way, if you said to someone, I'm going to use cloth nappies, it's not very often people are going to go, fantastic. Mostly they're going to go, oh, I tried that, or do you think that'll be okay? Or, you know, you really should look at convenience. There's actually this huge community support to say don't do it. So I think when I talked earlier about consent and having a conversation, that's what I was talking about, is just really listening to the language of support and putting yourself in front of people who will support you.
And there's always also the option of nappy diaper free.
Absolutely. Well, if you speak to anyone in the sort of 60 age group up, if you talk to them about nappies and ask them, and I challenge everyone to do this, go and ask your grandma or your auntie what age their child was out of nappies. And on average, your answer will be between 10 months and 14 months. That was actually normal. So what's happened in the last 30 to 40 years that's made 3 years of age the average age kids are out of nappies? The only difference is disposables and culture.
You're listening to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. Contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. For more information about this show, head to pbbmedia.org.
Products are, for the most part, depending on how you live, how off the grid you live, are an inevitable part of life, and can feel, even with a new baby, can feel like there's just never-ending stuff to get It can also be enjoyable, picking out baby outfits and special